The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, transmitted through every communications channel Earth possessed. It was written in 47 languages, including English, Mandarin, Spanish, and 33 others that humanity had never seen before. The message was formal and polite. The Galactic Council requested Earth's presence at their annual summit, to be held in 6 months at the neutral station orbiting the star humans called Proxima Centauri. Ambassador Catherine Rodriguez held the document in her hands, reading it for the 3rd time. Her office in Geneva overlooked the city, but she barely noticed the view. This was the 52nd invitation Earth had received in the past 150 years. Like the previous 51, this one would be filed, discussed briefly, and ultimately ignored. The pattern had started long ago, when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel. Earth's scientists had cracked the problem using a completely different method than the rest of the galaxy. While other species used what they called fold space technology, humans had developed something they called the compression drive. It worked differently, looked different, and most importantly, it belonged entirely to humanity. When the first invitation arrived, Earth's governments were suspicious. Who were these aliens? What did they want? Why should humanity submit to some council they had never heard of? The United Nations debated for months. Some wanted to attend, to learn, to join the galactic community. Others warned of tricks, of traps, of species that might see humans as resources to exploit. In the end, caution won. Earth sent a polite declining message and continued building its colonies on Mars and Europa. The second invitation came 5 years later. By then, humans had established settlements on 3 moons of Jupiter and were planning missions to Saturn. Again, the invitation was declined. Earth was busy with its own expansion, its own problems, its own future. Across the galaxy, in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, patience was wearing thin. Ambassador Velthara of the Arcanate stood before the assembled representatives, her crystalline form flickering with frustrated colors. She had been arguing for sanctions against Earth for the past decade. "This species insults us with their silence," Velthara said, her voice resonating through the translation devices every species wore. "They refuse our invitations, ignore our protocols, and expand into territories without proper registration. How long must we tolerate this disrespect?" The Zephrani representative, an ancient being that resembled floating kelp, pulsed softly. "Perhaps they do not understand our ways. They are young, recently arrived to the stars. We should show patience." "Patience?" Velthara's colors shifted to angry reds. "We have shown patience for 150 of their years. Meanwhile, they establish colony after colony, claiming worlds without council approval. They violate territorial agreements they never bothered to learn about." The debate continued for hours, as it had for decades. The council was divided. Some species thought Earth should be forced to comply. Others argued that forced membership violated the council's own principles. A few quietly wondered if humanity's absence said something important about the council itself. On Earth, Catherine Rodriguez attended another meeting about the latest invitation. The room was full of diplomats, military officers, and scientific advisors. They discussed the invitation the same way they always did. "We should attend," argued Ambassador Chen from the Pacific Alliance. "We can't isolate ourselves forever. There's a whole galaxy out there. And what would attending cost us?" General Morrison from North American Defense Command countered. "Submission to their laws? Their regulations? We've built everything we have on our own terms. Why give that up? When see that up," Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, Earth's leading xenobiologist, spoke carefully. "We've analyzed their technology from long-range scans. In some areas, they're more advanced than us. In others, we're ahead. But what concerns me is their political structure. The Council seems to operate as a hierarchy, with older species having more influence. If we join, we'd enter at the bottom." So we stay independent, Rodriguez concluded, writing her notes. We continue our expansion, develop our technology, and handle our own affairs. The galaxy can manage without us, and we can manage without them. The vote was unanimous, as it always was. Earth would send another polite declination and continue on its own path. But this time, something was different. When Earth established its 47th colony world in a system the Council had designated as pending territorial review, the response was not another invitation. 3 days after the colony transport ships landed, a message arrived. It was not polite. It was not an invitation. It was an ultimatum. The Galactic Council had voted to send a compliance fleet. 200 warships, the largest peacekeeping force ever assembled, would arrive at Earth's solar system in 30 days. Earth's leadership would attend the summit, acknowledge Council authority, and submit to standard galactic protocols. Refusal would result in economic sanctions, border restrictions, and potential military action. Catherine Rodriguez read the ultimatum with a cold feeling in her stomach. This was different from the invitations. This was a threat. She immediately called for an emergency session of the Global Security Council. Within hours, every major government on Earth was in communication. Military commanders checked defensive systems. Intelligence services analyzed the capabilities of 200 alien warships. Scientists calculated possible outcomes. Diplomats prepared responses. But in a secure facility hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains, a different kind of preparation was underway. Admiral James Cooper of Terran Defense Command stood before a massive holographic display showing Earth's entire military network. His officers waited for orders. "How many do we have ready?" Cooper asked quietly. His tactical officer checked her screens. "All defense platforms are operational. Lunar batteries are charged. Asteroid belt positions are fully armed. As for the fleet," she paused, looking at the numbers. "We can have 2,000 ships ready within 2 weeks." Cooper nodded slowly. Earth had not been idle during those 150 years of isolation. While the galaxy wondered why humans ignored their invitations, humanity had been preparing for the possibility that the universe might not be friendly. Every ignored invitation had reinforced one lesson. Earth would stand alone if necessary. And if you stand alone, you must be strong enough to make it matter. "Begin mobilization," Cooper ordered, quietly. "Let's see what this compliance fleet thinks they're walking into." Admiral Krethnor had commanded fleets for 300 years. His species, the Talrathi, had been spacefaring for over 4,000 years. He had seen rebellions crushed, pirates scattered, and border disputes settled. 200 warships under his command represented more firepower than most species possessed in their entire military. This mission would be simple. Arrive, make Earth understand their position, and escort their leaders to the summit. He expected it to take a week at most. The compliance fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, exactly where Council protocols dictated. Krethnor stood on his flagship's bridge, watching the primitive star system appear on the view screens. His sensors officer began scanning immediately, looking for Earth's military assets. "Report," Krethnor ordered, settling his forearms against the command rail. "Reading multiple colonies, Admiral. Mars has significant development. Several moons of the outer planets show habitation. I'm detecting communication networks, power generation, standard colonial infrastructure." The officer paused. "Military assets appear minimal. I count approximately 15 vessels in orbit around various planets. Sizes range from small patrol craft to what appears to be a destroyer-class ship near their moon." Krethnor felt satisfaction ripple through his scales. 15 ships. They had brought 200. This would indeed be simple. "Broadcast our message on all frequencies," he commanded. "Standard compliance protocol. Give them 72 hours to respond." The message was transmitted in every language Earth used. The terms were clear. Earth's leadership would attend the Galactic Summit within 30 days. They would acknowledge council authority over interstellar territories. They would submit their colonial claims for proper review and registration. Failure to comply would result in immediate sanctions and potential military action to enforce galactic law. On Earth, the message played in every government center, every military command post, every news broadcast. The people of Earth watched ships filling their screens, 200 alien vessels arranged in a formation designed to intimidate. For many, it was the first time they truly understood that ignoring the galaxy might have consequences. But in the Terran Defense Command Center, Admiral Cooper watched with different eyes. He had expected this, planned for this. His analysts had predicted the Council would eventually resort to force. Everything Earth had built in 150 years of isolation had prepared for this exact moment. Send the response, Cooper ordered. His communications officer hesitated only for a second before transmitting. The message was short, recorded by Cooper himself, sent in the same languages the Council had used. This is Terran Defense Command to approaching fleet. You have entered sovereign human territory without permission. Your ultimatum is rejected. You will leave our solar system immediately, or you will be removed. You have 48 hours to comply. Markency. On Kretnor's flagship, the bridge fell silent as the message played. His communications officer looked at him with confusion, written across her face. His tactical officer's scales flushed with colors, indicating shock. They're giving us an ultimatum? Kretnor said slowly. They have 15 ships, and they're threatening us? Admiral, perhaps they're bluffing, his second officer suggested, trying to appear strong while they prepare to negotiate. Kretnor considered this. It made sense. Weaker species often postured before accepting reality. He would call their bluff. Advance the fleet toward the planet they call Mars, he ordered. Battle formation. We'll show them what 200 ships looks like up close. That should end this foolishness. The fleet began moving inward, engines burning as they accelerated toward the inner solar system. They passed the orbit of the outermost planets. Moving through the area, humans called the Kuiper Belt, everything seemed quiet. Sensors showed nothing unusual. Then every alarm on every ship began screaming at once. Admiral. Weapons lock. Multiple. Weapons lock. The tactical officer's voice cracked with shock. I'm reading. This can't be right. I'm reading over 2,000 targeting systems. What? Kretnor lunged toward the tactical display. The screen showed his fleet surrounded by red targeting indicators. They came from everywhere. Hidden platforms in the asteroid belt. Concealed batteries on the dark side of moons. Orbital stations that looked like civilian infrastructure but were clearly military installations. Weapons buried in the rings of the outer planets. And signatures his computer couldn't even identify. Technologies his sensors had never encountered before. Full stop. Emergency stop, Kretnor ordered. His fleet halted, hanging in space, surrounded by targeting systems. A new message arrived from Earth. Admiral Cooper's face appeared on the screen, his expression calm and cold. Admiral Kretnor of the Talrathi Empire, you are currently targeted by 2,317 independent weapon systems. Each one is capable of destroying a ship your size. You have ignored our instruction to leave. We do not bluff. We do not negotiate from weakness. You have 46 hours remaining. Use them wisely. Kretnor felt fear for the first time in centuries. This was impossible. Intelligence reports said Earth was isolated, technologically backward in some areas, militarily weak. Where had these weapons come from? How had humanity built such defenses without anyone knowing? Attempt communication, he ordered, his voice steadier than he felt. I want to speak with their command. Tuvor. The response came quickly. Cooper appeared on the screen again, this time in real-time communication. Kretnor tried to maintain his authority. Admiral Cooper, there has been a misunderstanding. The Council seeks only peaceful compliance with galactic law. These weapons are unnecessary. Surely we can discuss. There is no misunderstanding, Cooper interrupted. You came to our home with warships. You delivered threats. You expected us to surrender because you brought 200 ships. You miscalculated. We have been preparing for this possibility for 150 years. While you wondered why we ignored your invitations, we were building the capability to remain independent. Now you see the result. The Council will not accept this defiance. Krethnor tried to sound commanding, but he could hear the weakness in his own voice. We represent 47 civilizations. This changes nothing. It changes everything, Cooper replied. You came here to force compliance. Instead, you have learned that Earth cannot be forced. You have 45 hours to leave our system. After that, we will consider your presence an act of war. Choose carefully. Admiral. The communication ended. Krethnor stood in silence, staring at the tactical display showing his fleet surrounded by weapons. His officers waited for orders. Finally, he spoke. Prepare to withdraw. Full retreat to Council space. Admiral, the Council will have to accept that their compliance mission failed, Krethnor said quietly, because the alternative is losing 200 ships and starting a war they didn't know they were unprepared for. Send the message. Tell them everything we found here. Tell them Earth is not what we thought. The fleet turned and burned hard for the edge of the solar system. Within 6 hours, they jumped to faster than light speed and vanished. Earth's weapons remained locked on their position until they disappeared from sensors. In the Terran Defense Command Center, Admiral Cooper allowed himself a small smile. The first test was over. Earth had made its point. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Council would not accept this humiliation easily. They would return, probably with more ships. Let them come, he thought. We'll be ready. Across the galaxy, in the Council chambers, emergency sessions began as reports from Admiral Krethnor arrived. Earth, the ignored world, the isolated species, had just made the entire galaxy reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted for 3 days. Representatives from 47 species argued, debated, and sometimes shouted at each other through their translation devices. Admiral Krethnor's report had shaken the foundation of everything the Council believed about their authority and power. Ambassador Velthara stood before the assembly, her crystalline form glowing bright red with anger. This cannot stand. Earth has defied us, threatened us, humiliated our fleet. If we accept this, our authority means nothing. Every species in the galaxy will think they can ignore Council law. We, the Zephrony representative pulsed with calming blue colors. But consider what we learned. Earth is not weak. They have advanced weapons, sophisticated defenses. Perhaps we should approach this differently. Perhaps dialogue. Dialogue? The Vex Dominion representative, a mechanical being named Executor Prime, interrupted with a harsh electronic tone. They had 150 years for dialogue. They chose weapons instead. Now we must respond with overwhelming force, or admit we have no power at all. End in 7. We must respond with overwhelming. End in 7. The debate continued. But the outcome was already certain. The Council's authority was at stake. They could not allow one species to defy them publicly and survive unpunished. A vote was called. The result was decisive. The Council would assemble the largest military force in galactic history. Not 200 ships. 2,000. They would jump directly to Earth's system in full battle formation, demand immediate and unconditional surrender, and if necessary, demonstrate the consequences of defiance through orbital bombardment. 3 months were needed to assemble the Armada. Ships came from every corner of Council space. The Arcanate contributed 400 vessels. The Talrathi Empire, embarrassed by their previous failure, sent 350. The Vex Dominion provided 200 of their most advanced warships. Smaller species contributed what they could, knowing their futures depended on the Council's authority being maintained. On Earth, intelligence services detected the buildup immediately. Spy satellites near Council space watched the gathering fleet. Agents on neutral stations reported ship movements. The analysis was clear and terrifying. The Council was preparing for war. The Global Security Council met in an emergency session. Holographic displays showed the gathering Armada, 2,000 warships. The numbers were staggering. Even with Earth's defenses, even with the weapons they had revealed, this was a force capable of destroying entire planets. We need to negotiate, Ambassador Chen argued, his face pale. 2,000 ships. Even if we can fight them, the damage would be catastrophic. How many of our colonies would be destroyed? How many lives lost? And if we surrender? General Morrison countered. We become subjects of the Council. Everything we've built, everything we've maintained our independence for, gone. We'd be at the bottom of their hierarchy forever. Admiral Cooper stood at the head of the table, studying the displays. They're bringing everything they have to make us submit. But there's something they don't know. He looked around the room at the assembled leaders. They think we showed them everything. They think those defensive platforms and weapon systems are all we have. The room fell silent. Ambassador Rodriguez leaned forward. Admiral, are you saying we have more? Much more, Cooper replied. We didn't build defenses for 150 years. We built a fleet we've kept hidden in deep space, in asteroid bases, in locations no one would think to look. The platforms and weapons they saw? Those were just our home defense systems. Our actual fleet has never been revealed. President Zhang of the Pacific Alliance took a deep breath. How many ships? 2,000, Cooper said simply. We can match them ship for ship. The room erupted in questions. How had such a fleet been kept secret? Where were the ships built? How were they powered and crewed? Cooper answered each question carefully. The fleet had been Earth's most protected secret, built in shipyards hidden in deep space beyond the Kuiper Belt, crewed by volunteers who understood they might never see home again until the day their ships were needed. But will they be enough? Rodriguez asked. The Council has species with thousands of years of spacefaring experience. Their technology is old, Cooper interrupted. They've been using the same basic technology for millennia because it works and because the Council discourages innovation that might upset the power balance. We've had 150 years of rapid development. No regulations holding us back. And the motivation of knowing we might be alone against a hostile galaxy. In some ways, we're ahead of them. In others, we're even. We're not facing an unbeatable force. We're facing an old system that's never been seriously challenged. The debate lasted hours. Some argued for negotiation, for finding a middle path. Others insisted that showing weakness now would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Finally, President Zhang called for a vote. The decision was made. Earth would not hide its strength. If the Council wanted to see what humanity had built, they would show them everything. The order went out through encrypted channels to every hidden base, every secret shipyard, every concealed fleet position. 2,000 warships began moving toward Earth's solar system, traveling through routes that avoided Council space, using human-developed stealth technology to avoid detection. Meanwhile, the Council's Armada completed its preparations. Admiral Velthara had been given command, a symbolic gesture showing the Arconate's leadership in enforcing Council authority. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, a massive dreadnought that had never seen actual combat in its 200 years of service. All ships report ready, her tactical officer announced. Jump coordinates confirmed. We'll emerge at the edge of their solar system in maximum intimidation formation. Excellent, Velthara said, her colors shifting to confident purples. Earth will see 2,000 ships appear simultaneously. They'll understand immediately that resistance is futile. With luck, they'll surrender without a shot being fired. The Armada jumped. Space twisted around 2,000 ships as they entered faster than light travel. Velthara counted the seconds until emergence, imagining Earth's shock and despair when they saw the fleet. The ships emerged from FTL at the designated coordinates. Sensors activated immediately, scanning the solar system. And then every officer on every bridge in the entire Armada froze in disbelief. "Admiral," Velthara's sensor officer said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm reading. There's a fleet. A human fleet. I count 2,000 ships." Velthara's colors drained to pale white. "That's impossible. Show me." "Load." The main view screen activated. There, arranged in perfect battle formation between the Council Armada and Earth, hung 2,000 human warships. They ranged from small, deadly-looking destroyers to massive carriers that dwarfed anything in the Council fleet. Dreadnoughts bristled with weapons that sensors couldn't fully identify. The formation was precise, professional, and utterly intimidating. A message broadcast across all channels. Admiral Cooper's face appeared on every screen in the Council Armada. "Admiral Velthara, welcome to our solar system. As you can see, we were expecting you. You brought 2,000 ships to force our compliance. We brought 2,000 ships to ensure our independence. The question now is, what happens next?" Velthara stared at the screen, her colors flickering between shock, fear, and anger. Behind Cooper's image, she could see the human fleet. Weapons systems tracking every Council ship with perfect precision. "Where did these ships come from?" she demanded. "Our intelligence said." "Your intelligence was wrong," Cooper interrupted calmly. "You should have wondered why we ignored your invitations for 150 years. We weren't hiding. We weren't cowering. We were building. Building something better than your Council ever imagined. Building the capability to stand alone, if necessary." Velthara looked at her tactical displays. 2,000 Council ships facing 2,000 human ships. But there was something else in the data that terrified her. The human ships were using formations and technologies her computers couldn't fully analyze. They had jump coordinates locked in for escape, suggesting confidence they could disengage if needed. And every human weapon was already targeted and tracking, while her fleet was still in emergence formation. "This changes nothing," she said, trying to maintain authority. "You are one species. We are 47. Today you face 2,000 ships. Tomorrow, we could return with 10,000. Cooper's expression didn't change. "Then tomorrow, you would commit the entire galaxy to a war that would devastate all of you. We don't want that war, Admiral. But understand this, you're looking at our defensive fleet, built to protect our home. You haven't seen our offensive capabilities." He paused, letting that sink in. "The real question is whether you want to find out." For 6 days, 2 armadas faced each other in the darkness between stars. 4,000 warships hung in space, weapons charged, shields active. Each side waiting for the other to make a move. The tension was unbearable. On every ship, crews stood at battle stations, knowing that if fighting started, thousands would die in the first minutes. On Earth, people watched the news with growing fear. The images from space showed the 2 fleets, massive and deadly, close enough that a single mistake could trigger devastation. Schools closed, emergency supplies were distributed. Evacuation plans for major cities were activated, though everyone knew there was nowhere to run if orbital bombardment began. In the Council Armada, Admiral Velthara held constant meetings with her command staff. They analyzed the human fleet endlessly, trying to find weaknesses, looking for advantages. The more they studied, the more concerned they became. "Their shields are different from ours," her chief engineer reported. "They seem to use some kind of layered system we don't fully understand. Our weapons would be effective, but perhaps not as effective as against our own ships. What about their weapons? Velthara asked. Unknown, the tactical officer admitted. We can detect the energy signatures, but the technology is unfamiliar. They might be more powerful than our weapons. They might be less powerful. We won't know until they fire. Velthara's colors shifted to frustrated oranges. So we're facing an enemy whose capabilities we cannot assess, who showed up with exactly as many ships as we brought, who has been preparing for this confrontation for 150 years. And we're supposed to force their surrender? Behind the scenes, frantic communication flowed between Velthara's flagship and the council chambers, light years away. The council was divided again. Some species insisted on pressing the attack, arguing that backing down would destroy the council's authority forever. Others pointed out that attacking might result in massive losses and a prolonged war Earth seemed prepared for. 3 days into the standoff, a message arrived from the council. Velthara was authorized to attempt negotiation. If Earth would agree to attend the summit and acknowledge some form of council authority, even a limited one, they could avoid conflict. But the council would not accept complete defiance. Some compromise had to be reached. Velthara sent a message to Admiral Cooper proposing a meeting aboard a neutral location. After 4 hours, Cooper agreed. They would meet at a small, automated research station in the Kuiper Belt, far from both fleets. Each side could bring a small delegation. No weapons. No ships within 1,000 kilometers. The meeting room was plain and functional, designed for scientific research rather than diplomatic negotiations. Velthara arrived with 3 advisors: her chief diplomat, her military strategist, and a legal expert on council law. Cooper brought similar support: Ambassador Rodriguez, General Morrison, and Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's leading expert on galactic politics. They sat across a table from each other, 2 species who had never met face to face, deciding the future of human independence. Let me be direct, Velthara began, her colors shifting to negotiating blues and greens. The Council cannot accept complete defiance. Our authority is the foundation of galactic peace. If you can ignore us with impunity, others will follow. Chaos will result. Your peace is built on submission, Rodriguez replied calmly. Species join your council and accept laws they had no part in creating. They submit to protocols designed by older, more powerful species. That's not peace. That's control. It's order, Velthara's diplomat interjected. Without the council, there would be constant wars over territory, resources, trade routes. We provide structure. You provide structure for those willing to accept their place at the bottom, General Morrison said. We're not. The conversation went in circles for hours. The council demanded acknowledgement of their authority. Earth refused to submit to laws they had no say in creating. Velthara offered compromises. Earth could join with special status, with certain exemptions, with gradual integration. Rodriguez countered with Earth's own proposal: recognition as a fully independent power, equal to the Council itself, with diplomatic relations, but no subordination. Impossible, Velthara said flatly. The Council cannot recognize a single species as equal to an organization of 47 civilizations. The precedent would be disastrous. Then we're at an impasse, Cooper said, because we will not accept being treated as inferiors. Dr. Chen, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke. Ambassador Velthara, may I ask a question? In your 4,000 years of spacefaring history, has the Talrathi Empire ever been conquered? Ever been forced to submit to another power? Velthara's colors flickered with surprise at the question. No. We have always been independent. Then you understand why we're here, Chen said softly. You understand what independence means. You've never had to give it up, so you can't imagine doing so. That's exactly how we feel. We've built our civilization on the principle that humanity determines its own destiny. Asking us to surrender, that is asking us to surrender who we are. The room fell silent. Velthara looked at Chen for a long moment, her colors shifting through patterns that suggested deep thought. Your comparison is flawed, Velthara finally said. The Talrathi are a council member. We maintain our independence within the framework of galactic law. Because you were powerful enough when the council formed to negotiate favorable terms, Morrison pointed out. You got to help write the rules. We're being asked to follow rules we had no part in creating. Another long silence. Then, Velthara's legal advisor leaned forward. Perhaps there is a precedent we've overlooked. The Council recognizes certain neutral powers, species that maintain diplomatic relations without full membership. The Corinthian Compact, for example. The Compact is isolated, with no colonies outside their home system, Velthara objected. Earth has 47 colonies. They're expanding rapidly. How can we grant them neutral status when they're actively claiming territory? We respect existing territorial claims, Rodriguez offered. We won't expand into space claimed by other species. We'll submit to arbitration in case of disputes. We'll participate in mutual defense pacts against external threats, but we won't accept council authority over our internal affairs. And what do we gain from this? Velthara's military strategist asked. Why should the council agree to such terms? Veltharas. Cooper smiled slightly. Because the alternative is war. A war that would cost both sides thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of lives. A war that would devastate trade routes and colonial infrastructure throughout this region of space. A war that Earth is prepared for, and the Council clearly isn't. And even if you win, you'll face continued resistance, insurgency, and problems for generations. He paused. Or you could accept that we're not going to submit, and instead work with us as equals. Share technology. Cooperate against common threats. Build something better than the current system. We could offer some of our defensive technology, Chen added. Our shield systems, for example. Council member species would benefit from improved defenses against external threats. Velthara's colors shifted rapidly, processing the implications. Because cooperation benefits everyone, Rodriguez said. Because we don't want to be enemies. We just refuse to be subordinates. The negotiation continued through the night and into the next day. Slowly, carefully, a framework emerged. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign, independent power with the right to self-governance. They would maintain diplomatic relations with the Council, attend summits as an independent entity, and participate in trade and cultural exchange. They would respect existing territorial claims and submit disputes to neutral arbitration. In exchange, Earth would share certain defensive technologies and participate in mutual defense agreements. It wasn't the complete submission the Council wanted. It wasn't the total independence Earth preferred. It was compromise. The kind that leaves both sides somewhat unsatisfied, but prevents catastrophic war. I must take this proposal to the Council, Velthara said finally. It will require a vote. The outcome is uncertain. We'll wait, Cooper replied. But Admiral, understand this. We've waited 6 days already. Our crews are tired. Our people are frightened. If the Council rejects this proposal, if they insist on war, we will not back down. Choose wisely. The meeting ended. Both delegations returned to their fleets. The standoff continued, but now there was a possibility, however slim, of resolution without bloodshed. The vote in the Galactic Council took 3 days. Representatives argued passionately on both sides. Some saw the proposed treaty as a reasonable solution that avoided war. Others viewed it as surrender to a single upstart species that would encourage others to seek independence. The Arcanate, embarrassed by the standoff, argued most strongly against compromise. Younger species, quietly impressed by humanity's achievement, suggested that perhaps absolute council authority was outdated. In Earth's solar system, the two armadas waited. Crews maintained battle stations in shifts, exhausted but alert. On Earth itself, people watched the skies and prayed for peace. Admiral Cooper reviewed battle plans he hoped would never be needed, while Ambassador Rodriguez prepared speeches for either outcome. On the 6th day of standoff, a message arrived. The Council had voted. The result was narrow. 53% in favor of the treaty. It was enough. The Treaty of Saul, as historians would later call it, was transmitted simultaneously to both fleets. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign, independent power, the first species in galactic history to achieve such status without being part of the original Council formation. They would maintain diplomatic relations, participate in trade agreements, and attend summits as equals rather than subordinates. They accepted responsibility to respect existing territorial claims and agreed to neutral arbitration for disputes. Most surprisingly, the treaty included a provision for technology exchange. Earth would share certain defensive innovations with Council species, while gaining access to Council scientific databases and cultural archives. It was cooperation based on mutual benefit rather than submission. When the treaty was confirmed, both fleets stood down. Weapons were deactivated. Shields were lowered to minimum power. A joint communication was broadcast to both armadas and to Earth itself, announcing the agreement. On Admiral Velthara's flagship, the mood was mixed. Some officers felt they had failed in their mission to enforce Council authority. Others were simply relieved that war had been avoided. Velthara herself stood on the bridge, watching the human fleet maintain its formation, and felt something unexpected. Respect. They were ready to fight, her tactical officer said quietly. The analysis is complete. If we had engaged, losses on both sides would have been catastrophic. They weren't bluffing. No, Velthara agreed. They weren't. They spent 150 years preparing to stand alone if necessary. We should have paid more attention to their silence. She initiated a communication request to Cooper's flagship. Cooper appeared on the screen, looking tired but satisfied. Admiral Velthara, I assume you're preparing to withdraw? Crossed. We are, Velthara confirmed. But first, I wanted to speak directly. You've forced the galaxy to change, Admiral. The Council has never made such a concession. Some species will celebrate this. Others will demand similar treatment. You've created uncertainty in a system that valued stability above all else. Maybe your system needed some uncertainty, Cooper replied. Maybe stability maintained through force isn't as valuable as you think. Perhaps. Velthara's colors shifted thoughtfully. Or perhaps you've simply demonstrated that force alone doesn't create stability. Your fleet is impressive, Admiral. Your technology is remarkable. But what truly forced this treaty was your willingness to fight for your independence. That kind of determination is rare. It's not rare, Cooper corrected gently. It's universal. Every species wants to control their own destiny. Your Council just never gave them the option to prove it. The conversation ended with mutual acknowledgement of respect. Over the next 2 days, both fleets withdrew. The Council Armada jumped back to their various home systems, carrying news of the unprecedented treaty. Earth's fleet dispersed to defensive positions throughout the solar system, ready to respond if the treaty proved temporary. But something had changed in the galaxy. Within weeks, 3 other species formally requested recognition as independent powers, using the Treaty of Saul as precedent. The Council debated each request intensely. Some were granted modified status. Others were denied. But the absolute authority the Council had maintained for millennia was forever altered. 6 months after the standoff, the next Galactic Summit convened. For the first time in 150 years, Earth sent a delegation, but they arrived aboard a human dreadnought, not a Council transport. Admiral Cooper attended as military liaison, Ambassador Rodriguez served as Earth's primary representative. They entered the Grand Council chamber not as petitioners seeking admission, but as representatives of an independent power. The chamber fell silent as the human delegation took their seats in a section designated for neutral powers and observers. 47 species watched them, some with hostility, others with curiosity, a few with undisguised admiration. When called upon to address the assembly, Rodriguez stood and spoke clearly. For 150 years, we ignored your invitations to this council. Many of you interpreted that as arrogance or ignorance. The truth was simpler. We didn't need you. We were building our own civilization, our own future, according to our own values. We saw no reason to submit to a system we hadn't helped create and didn't fully understand. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates' translation devices flickered with agitation. Rodriguez continued. But not needing you doesn't mean we can't work with you. The galaxy is vast enough for many powers, many voices, many ways of organizing civilizations. We're here today not because we were forced to attend, but because we choose to engage as equals. We bring our perspective, our technology, and our willingness to cooperate on mutual interests. What we don't bring is submission. She paused, looking around the chamber. Some of you resent the precedent we've set. You worry that others will seek independence, that the Council's authority will crumble. Perhaps it should. Perhaps an organization that relies on forced compliance isn't as strong as one built on voluntary cooperation. We're willing to find out. The speech was bold, perhaps too bold for the more traditional species, but it resonated with younger civilizations and those who had always quietly chafed under Council restrictions. When the vote came to formally recognize Earth's representative status, it passed with a wider margin than the original treaty. Over the following months, Earth began limited technology exchanges with several Council species. Human shield technology proved particularly valuable, significantly improving defensive capabilities against the kind of external threats all civilizations faced. In return, Earth gained access to advanced medical technologies and agricultural techniques that would benefit their rapidly expanding colonies. Trade agreements followed. Cultural exchanges began. Human music, literature, and art started appearing in galactic markets. Earth scientists collaborated with alien researchers on projects neither could accomplish alone. The relationship was complex, sometimes tense, but functional. Admiral Velthara, who had initially led the Armada against Earth, became one of the strongest advocates for the new relationship. She visited Earth twice in the year following the treaty, meeting with military and civilian leaders. In a private conversation with Admiral Cooper, she admitted, "You were right. Our system needed to change. Forcing compliance was easier than earning cooperation. But that doesn't make it better." Cooper smiled. "The galaxy is learning what we figured out 150 years ago. Independence is worth fighting for, but cooperation is worth building toward." 50 years later, the Treaty of Sol was taught in educational institutions across the galaxy as a turning point in interstellar relations. Earth's ignored invitations became legendary, a reminder that absence of response could itself be an answer. The Galactic Council transformed gradually into a true federation of equals rather than a hierarchy of submission. When an extragalactic threat appeared on the rim of known space, the combined fleet that assembled to meet it numbered not thousands, but tens of thousands of ships. Earth contributed 5,000 vessels, working alongside forces from species that had once demanded their submission. The threat was neutralized through overwhelming coordinated force, proof that cooperation among equals was stronger than submission to authority. In the decades that followed, other species achieved independence, using the path Earth had blazed. Some maintained close relations with the Council. Others, like humanity, kept their distance while cooperating on specific issues. The galaxy became more diverse, more complex, and arguably more free than it had been in millennia. And Earth, the world that had ignored every invitation for 150 years, became known as the species that taught the galaxy a simple but profound lesson. Respect must be earned, not demanded. Independence must be defended, not granted. And the strongest partnerships are built between equals who choose to work together rather than subordinates forced to comply. The 2,000 ships that had faced down the Council Armada were remembered not as instruments of war, but as symbols of determination. They proved that a single species, if sufficiently committed to their principles and prepared to defend them, could stand against the weight of galactic authority and emerge not just undefeated, but respected. The galaxy was forever changed. And humanity, having finally joined the galactic community on their own terms, looked forward to a future they would help shape as equals among the stars.
The galaxy chuckled when humans sent one ship. Then it arrived. Jack Winters stood alone in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. He was the only human in a room filled with aliens from 300 different worlds. Jack took a deep breath and spoke into the silence. "Earth will send one ship to face the void-born threat," he said. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a low rumble began. It grew louder until the whole chamber shook with laughter. The tall, blue-skinned Arcturians clutched their sides. The floating, mist beings of Rigel pulsed with amusement. Even the usually serious rock creatures of Deneb made grinding sounds that passed for chuckles among their kind. One ship? The council leader, a six-armed being called Zoral, fought to control his laughter. The Voidborn fleet has destroyed entire civilizations. They crushed the Zenith Defense Force with its 1,000 warships. And you humans, barely out of your home system, think one ship will make a difference? Jack's face remained calm, even as his stomach twisted with anger and shame. "We offer what we can," he said simply, then left the chamber as the laughter followed him out. Back on Earth, Admiral Susan Miller watched the transmission end. At 58 years old, she had steel-gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much war. She turned to the small group gathered in the command center of Earth's last orbital station. "Well, that went as expected," she said. Commander Paul Reeves, her second-in-command, shook his head. "They don't understand us yet." "They will," Susan said. She looked through the viewport at the ship docked outside. It wasn't very big compared to the giant vessels of older spacefaring races. The name ESV Defiance was painted on its side, in bold letters. Susan's chief engineer, Alan Rogers, stepped forward. He was in his 40s with tired eyes and hands stained with engine grease. "The phase converter is installed, Admiral. But I have to warn you again, this technology is based on a crashed Voidborn scout ship. We think it will work, but we've never tested it in real conditions." "Will it fly, Alan?" Susan asked. "Yes." "Will it fight?" Alan rubbed his face. "In theory, it should do much more than fight. If I'm right about the Voidborn technology having this weakness, well, one ship might be enough." Susan nodded. "Then we proceed as planned." The command center doors opened, and Lisa Green entered. As communications officer, she had been coordinating with what remained of Earth Command. "The last civilian. Ships are launching now, Admiral. Evacuation is at 60% capacity." "It will have to be enough," Susan said. She looked around at her team. "We leave in 6 hours. Get some rest while you can." Later, Susan stood alone in her quarters, recording a message on a small device. "Kate, honey, by the time you get this, we'll be gone. Keep helping with the evacuations. You're doing important work." She paused, looking at a photo of her daughter. "We may not return, but we will not go quietly." As the launch hour approached, 38 crew members boarded the Defiance. Each had been picked for their special skills. They were Earth's best, and possibly its last hope. Doug Franklin, the tactical officer, studied star charts in the ship's war room. He had plotted their course through dangerous space to reach the Voidborn fleet, while avoiding detection for as long as possible. In the medical bay, Dr. Sam Green prepared his equipment. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew casualties were likely. Helen Garcia calibrated the sensor arrays. As the ship's eyes and ears, she would need to spot danger before it found them. Ryan Cooper checked and rechecked the weapon systems. They were simple by galactic standards, but he had some surprises planned for the enemy. Security Chief Nancy Watson led her small team through combat drills. If the Voidborn boarded them, her people would be the last line of defense. Olivia Martinez helped Alan make final adjustments to the phase converter. The strange device hummed in the engine room, its parts glowing with an unearthly light. "Will it really work?" Olivia asked quietly. Alan looked at the machine. 3 months ago, I would have said no. But we've learned so much from that crashed scout ship. The Voidborn use a type of dimensional phasing for their weapons and drives. If we can disrupt that phasing... He shrugged. Then maybe, just maybe, we have a chance. On the bridge, Susan settled into the captain's chair. Paul took his place beside her, while Lisa established their final link with Earth Command. "All systems ready, Admiral," Paul reported. Susan looked at the main screen, which showed Earth growing smaller as the station moved away. There were still millions of people down there waiting for evacuation ships that might never come if the Defiance failed. "Start the main drive," Susan ordered. "Set course for the Orion sector." The ship's engines came to life with a deep rumble. Outside, blue light flared as the Defiance moved away from the station. Susan opened a channel to the entire ship. "This is Admiral Miller. We all know our mission. The Voidborn Armada will reach Earth in 14 days. We have until then to stop them. The Galactic Council laughed at us. They think one ship can't make a difference." She paused. "Let's prove them wrong." The Defiance accelerated, the stars on the view screen stretching into lines as the faster-than-light drive engaged. The ship disappeared into the depths of space, carrying with it humanity's last hope. On the Galactic Council station, a maintenance worker approached Jack Winters as he prepared to return to Earth. "I heard what happened in the council," the worker said. He wasn't human, but looked similar enough. "They shouldn't have laughed." Jack shrugged. "It doesn't matter. We're used to being underestimated." The worker looked curious. "But why only one ship? Surely you could have sent more." "We only needed one," Jack said, his eyes holding a secret. The council had missed between their laughs. Sometimes quality matters more than quantity. As Jack's shuttle pulled away from the station, he watched the stars and wondered if he would ever see Susan and her crew again. The Defiance was heading into darkness, toward an enemy that had destroyed worlds. But if there was one thing humans knew how to do, it was to defy the odds. The galaxy chuckled when humans sent one ship. Then it arrived. 2 weeks passed as the Defiance traveled deeper into space than any human ship had gone before. The crew settled into their routines, but tension filled the air. Everyone knew they were heading toward an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. Susan spent most of her time on the bridge, studying reports and planning their approach. She slept little, and when she did, dreams of Earth's burning cities followed her. "Admiral," Helen called from her sensor station. "I'm picking up a ship ahead." Susan straightened in her chair. "Voidborn?" "No." Helen adjusted her instruments. "It's a Zenith Coalition cruiser, but it's damaged, no engine signature." The Zenith Coalition had been among the few who tried to help Earth when the Voidborn first attacked. They had paid a heavy price for their kindness. "Any life signs?" "Susan?" asked. Helen nodded. "Faint, but yes." "Lisa, open a channel," Susan ordered. When the communications officer nodded, Susan spoke clearly. "This is Admiral Susan Miller of the Earthship Defiance. Do you need assistance?" Static filled the speakers, then broke into a weak voice. "Earthship? Out here? This is Captain Kretal of the Zenith vessel Starlight. We need help." Within an hour, the Defiance had matched course with the drifting Zenith ship. Susan led a small team including Dr. Sam and security, Chief Nancy, to the damaged vessel. The interior of the Zenith ship was dark with emergency lights casting red shadows. Captain Kretal met them in what remained of the main corridor. He was an avian being with feathers that might once have been bright blue but were now dirty and singed. His right wing hung at an awkward angle. "Humans," he said, his bird-like eyes blinking in surprise. I never expected to see your kind this deep in contested space. Sam moved forward with a medical scanner. May I check your injuries, Captain? While Sam tended to Kretal and the other survivors, Susan questioned the captain about what had happened. We were on a reconnaissance mission, Kretal explained. The Voidborn destroyed our fleet weeks ago, but a few ships escaped. We were trying to gather information on their movements. He shook his head. They caught us near the Cygnus crossing. My ship was damaged, but we managed to hide in a nebula and drift this far before our engines failed completely. How many ships in the Voidborn fleet ahead? Susan asked. At least 200, Kretal said. Maybe more. They're gathering for a major push into this sector. His eyes narrowed. But what are you doing here? And in only one ship? Susan shared a look with Nancy before answering. We're on a mission to stop the Voidborn. Kretal made a sound between a laugh and a squawk. Stop them? With one ship? Admiral, my people had 50 warships and the Voidborn crushed us in hours. We may have found a weakness in their technology, Susan said simply. Kretal studied her, then slowly nodded. You humans are either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both. After helping the Zenith crew make essential repairs to their life support systems, Susan invited Kretal to the Defiance to share what he knew about the Voidborn fleet's position. In the war room, Doug brought up a holographic map of the sector. Kretal pointed to a cluster of red dots. The main fleet is here, he said. They have scout ships patrolling these areas. His feathered hand swept across several star systems. If you continue on your current course, you'll encounter them within 3 days. Doug looked at Susan. We could try to go around them, Admiral, but it would add at least a week to our journey. We don't have a week, Susan said. Earth has days, not weeks. She studied the map and pointed to a dense asteroid field. What about through here? Kretal chirped in alarm. That's the Certain field. The rocks there move in unpredictable patterns. No large ship can navigate it safely. The Defiance isn't large by your standards, Susan said. Doug, can we make it through? The tactical officer studied the field data. It would be tight, but yes, the Voidborn ships are much bigger than ours. They couldn't follow. Then that's our path, Susan decided. Before the Defiance continued its journey, Susan offered to take the Zenith survivors aboard. To her surprise, Kretal and 3 of his crew asked to join them. Our ship will never fly properly again, Kretal said, and I would like to see this weakness you found in the Voidborn. If you succeed, my people need to know how. In the engineering bay, Alan and Olivia worked without rest to refine the phase converter. Early tests had produced unstable results, threatening to tear holes in the ship's hull. The problem is the quantum harmonics, Alan said, looking at the data on his screen. When we activate the converter, it creates a cascade effect we can't control. Olivia studied the equations, then looked at the Voidborn technology they had salvaged. What if we're approaching this wrong, she asked. We've been trying to disrupt their weapon systems, but what if we targeted their communication frequency instead? Alan looked up sharply. What do you mean? The Voidborn ships move together perfectly, like they share one mind, Olivia explained. What if they do? What if there's a communication network linking them all? If we could disrupt that? Alan's tired face broke into a smile. That could work. Let's recalibrate. As the Defiance entered the edge of the asteroid field, the bridge crew watched in tense silence. Massive rocks, some as big as the ship itself, floated around them. Doug's hands moved steadily over the controls, guiding the ship through the narrowing gaps. This is like threading a needle while riding a bicycle down a mountain, Paul muttered. A large asteroid spun toward them, and Doug quickly adjusted their course. The ship shuddered as smaller rocks scraped against the shields. Shields, holding at 80%, Ryan reported from the weapons station. It took 6 tense hours to navigate the field. When they emerged on the other side, a cheer went up from the bridge crew, but the celebration was short-lived. Admiral, Helen said, her voice tight. Sensors are detecting multiple ships ahead, Voidborn scout vessels. Susan took a deep breath. They had found the enemy sooner than expected. Battle stations, she ordered. Lisa, open a channel on all frequencies. Channel open, Admiral. Susan stood tall. This is Admiral Susan Miller of Earth. We've come to talk. The view screen lit up with the image of a void-born ship. It was black and sleek, with strange protrusions that glowed with purple energy. For a long moment, there was no response. Then the Voidborn launched their fighters. The galaxy chuckled. When humans sent one ship. Then it arrived. The Voidborn fighters streaked toward the Defiance like angry hornets. There were 12 of them, each the size of a small shuttle, their hulls glowing with the same purple energy as their mothership. So much for talking, Paul said. Susan gripped the arms of her chair. Ryan, arm all weapons. Doug, evasive pattern delta. The Defiance surged forward, then swerved sharply as the first wave of fighters opened fire. Purple, energy beams cut through space where the ship had been seconds before. Return fire, Susan ordered. Ryan's fingers flew over his console. The ship's guns roared to life, sending bright blue pulses toward the enemy. 2 fighters exploded as direct hits tore through their shields. 2 down, Ryan reported. 10-2. Go. Doug kept the ship moving in unpredictable patterns, but they couldn't dodge everything. The ship shook as enemy fire struck their shields. Shields at 60%, Helen called out. The battle raged for nearly an hour. The Defiance shouldn't have lasted 10 minutes against so many enemies, but Doug's flying skills kept them just ahead of destruction. Ryan found weak spots in the Voidborn fighters that no one had seen before. 4 more enemy ships exploded under his careful aim, but the Defiance was taking damage. A lucky shot from one fighter hit an exposed part of the hull, causing a small breach. Hull breach on Deck 3, Paul reported. Emergency containment activated. Susan was about to respond when the ship rocked with a much larger impact. What was that? She demanded. Helen checked her sensors. The mothership has joined the fight. Its weapons are much stronger than the fighters. We can't take much more of this, Paul warned. Susan hit the ship-wide comm. Alan, we need the phase converter now. In the engine room, Alan and Olivia worked, frantically amid sparking panels and hissing steam pipes. It's not ready, Alan shouted back. The targeting system isn't calibrated for the communication frequency yet. Another hit rocked the ship. Olivia grabbed a railing to keep from falling. We need more time, she said. Above them, on the bridge, Susan made a quick decision. Doug, take us back into the asteroid field. Paul looked at her in shock. Admiral, we barely made it through the first time, and that was with full shields, and no one shooting at us. It's our only chance, Susan insisted. The Voidborn ships are bigger, they'll have an even harder time following us. Doug didn't argue. He turned the ship sharply and headed back toward the massive rocks floating in space. The Voidborn fighters followed, still firing. As they entered the field, Doug weaved between asteroids with incredible skill. 2 Voidborn fighters crashed into rocks when they couldn't turn fast enough. Another was crushed between 2 colliding asteroids, but the Defiance wasn't unscathed. A direct hit from the mothership before they reached the field had weakened their shields further, and now, small rocks were hitting the hull directly. Hull integrity at 70%, Helen reported. We're taking damage from the asteroids now. The ship shuddered as a larger rock scraped along its side. Find us a place to hide, Susan ordered. Somewhere we can make repairs. Doug spotted a cluster of large asteroids moving slowly together. There, he said, pointing to a gap between them. We can slip in there and be hidden from their sensors. He guided the ship into the tight space. The remaining Voidborn fighters circled outside the asteroid cluster, unable to follow. Power down all non-essential systems, Susan ordered. Let them think we've been destroyed. The bridge lights dimmed as they reduced power. On the view screen, they watched as the Voidborn fighters continued to search for several minutes, then finally turned and headed back to their mothership. They're leaving, Helen whispered. For now, Susan said. But they'll be back with more ships once they report finding us. She stood up. We have a few hours at most. Paul, organize repair teams. I want this ship ready to fight again as soon as possible. Susan went to the engine room to check on Alan and Olivia. The phase converter sat in the center of the room, parts of it glowing with an otherworldly light. "How long?" she asked. Alan wiped sweat from his forehead. "The recalibration for the communication frequency is working. Olivia was right. The Voidborn ships are connected somehow. But we need to test it before we use it in battle." "Test it how?" Susan asked. "We salvaged a small piece of Voidborn technology from that crashed scout ship," Olivia explained. "If the converter can disrupt that, it should work on their ships too." Susan nodded. "Do it. I'll be on the bridge." As she left, Kretal approached her in the corridor. The avian alien had been helping with repairs, his knowledge of space combat proving valuable. "Your ship fought well," he said. "Better than I expected." "Thanks," Susan replied. "But we got lucky." Kretal tilted his head. "Not luck, skill. Your pilot flies like no one I've seen before, and your weapons officer found weaknesses in the Voidborn fighters that my people missed in dozens of battles." Susan allowed herself a small smile. "Humans are good at finding ways to win when we're outmatched." "So I see," Kretal said. Then, his tone grew serious. "But the mothership has surely called for reinforcements by now. The main fleet isn't far away." "I know," Susan said. "That's why we need to get the phase converter working." As repairs continued around the ship, Nancy Watson, the security chief, reported to the bridge. "Admiral, my team checked the hull breach on Deck 3. It's sealed for now, but that section isn't safe." "Casualties?" Susan asked. "2 injured. No deaths," Nancy replied. "Dr. Sam is treating them now." Susan nodded, relieved. Then Helen's voice cut through the moment of calm. "Admiral, sensors are showing multiple ships entering this sector." Susan's heart sank. "Voidborn reinforcements?" "No," Helen said, surprise in her voice. "They're Zenith ships. 3 cruisers. Lisa's." Station beeped. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead ship." "Put it through," Susan ordered. The view screen showed another avian being, similar to Kretal, but with darker feathers. "Earth vessel, this is Commander Zev of the Zenith Resistance. We picked up your battle with the Voidborn. Captain Kretal is an old friend of mine. Is he aboard your ship?" Kretal stepped forward. "I am here, Zev. These humans have a plan to fight the Voidborn. They need our help." Zev nodded. "Then they shall have it. The Voidborn took our homes. We have nothing left to lose." Susan felt hope rising in her chest. "Commander Zev, we welcome your assistance. But you should know that our plan is risky. We've developed a device that might disrupt the Voidborn network, but it's untested." "Better an untested hope than no hope at all," Zev replied. "We will buy you time to finish your work." As the Zenith ships took up defensive positions around the asteroid cluster, Alan's voice came over the comm. "Admiral, you need to see this. The test worked. The phase converter is ready." Susan exchanged looks with Paul. "Then it's time to take the fight to the Voidborn." The galaxy chuckled when humans sent one ship. Then it arrived. Susan, Paul, and Kretal gathered in the engine room, where Alan and Olivia stood proudly beside the phase converter. The device hummed with energy, its core glowing with a blue-white light. "Show me," Susan said. Alan picked up a small piece of Voidborn technology, a curved black metal shard with faint purple lines running through it. He placed it on a table near the converter. "Watch," he said, then pressed a button on his control pad. The phase converter pulsed. A wave of blue energy washed over the Voidborn shard. The purple lines flickered, then went dark. The shard itself seemed to crack slightly as if something inside it had broken. "The energy signature is completely gone," Olivia explained. "The converter disrupts the specific frequency the Voidborn use to communicate and power their technology." "Will it work on their ships?" Paul asked. "It should," Alan said. "But there's a catch. The effect has a limited range, about 5,000 kilometers. We'll need to get close to their command ship to affect the entire fleet." Susan frowned. "That's too close. Their weapons would tear us apart before we could activate it." "The Zenith ships could help," Kretal suggested. "They could draw some of the fire away from you." Susan nodded slowly. We'll need a plan. A good one. They returned to the bridge where Commander Zev's image waited on the view screen. The phase converter works, Susan told him. But to affect the Voidborn fleet, we need to get close to their command ship. Zev nodded. My scouts report that the main Voidborn fleet is only 6 hours away. They're moving toward this position now. Then we don't have much time, Susan said. Here's what I propose. Your ships engage the outer defense line. While the Voidborn are focused on you, the Defiance will slip through to their command ship. Embriar. Bold plan, Zev said. But the Voidborn will still have many ships protecting their command center. We'll deal with those when we get there, Susan replied. For now, let's focus on repairs and prepare for battle. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of activity. Repair teams fixed what damage they could. Ryan worked with the Zenith weapons, specialists to coordinate their attack. Doug and Helen plotted the most direct course to the heart of the Voidborn fleet. In the medical bay, Dr. Sam checked on the injured crew members one last time. They should stay here during the battle, he told Susan. No, said one of the injured engineers, sitting up despite his bandaged arm. My station is in engineering. I'm not hiding when the fight comes. Susan saw the same determination in everyone's eyes. Her throat tightened with pride. Get to your stations, she said simply. All of you. When Helen's sensors detected the approaching Voidborn fleet, all 4 ships, the Defiance and the 3 Zenith cruisers, moved out from the asteroid field in formation. Mother of Stars, Paul whispered as the view screen showed what they faced. At least 200 Voidborn ships filled the space ahead of them. The smaller ones were twice the size of the Defiance, while the larger warships dwarfed even the Zenith cruisers. In the center of the formation was a massive ship, shaped like a black star with 5 points, each one as long as a small moon. That's their command ship, Kretal said, his feathers ruffling in fear. The Void Star. Susan took a deep breath. Signal Commander Zev. It's time. The Zenith ships moved forward, firing their weapons at the outer line of Voidborn vessels. The space lit up with energy blasts and explosions. Now, Doug, Susan ordered. Take us in. The Defiance shot forward, engines at full power. Doug guided the ship through the chaos of battle, dodging around fighting ships and through gaps in the Voidborn formation. The Voidborn noticed them quickly. 5 ships broke off to intercept the Defiance. Incoming, Helen shouted. Evasive maneuvers, Susan commanded. Ryan, target their drive systems. The Defiance twisted and turned as enemy fire streaked past. Ryan's shots were precise, hitting vulnerable points on 2 of the pursuing ships and slowing them down. But they couldn't dodge everything. The ship shook as energy blasts struck their shields. Shields at 40%, Helen reported. Another hit rocked the ship harder. Direct hit to the port engine, Paul called out. We're losing power. Reroute auxiliary power, Susan ordered. The ship lurched forward again, but slower than before. More Voidborn ships were turning toward them now. We're not going to make it through their line, Paul said, his voice tense. Susan was about to respond when Lisa called out, Admiral! I'm picking up a transmission. It's not from the Zenith ships. Put it through, Susan said. A voice crackled over the speakers, a human voice. Defiance. This is Captain George Ward of the Earth Ship Venture. We see you could use some help. Susan stared at the view screen in shock as 3 Earth ships burst into view, firing on the Voidborn vessels pursuing the Defiance. Earth ships? Paul gasped. How? Captain Ward, Susan responded, finding her voice. Your arrival is unexpected. A chuckle came over the comm. When you left Earth, Admiral, you inspired others. We followed as soon as we could, and we brought friends. Behind the Earth ships, more vessels appeared. Smaller, faster ships of different designs. We stopped at the Galactic Council station, Ward explained. Your ambassador, Jack Winters, was very persuasive once he showed the Council our phase converter plans. These are ships from 7 different worlds who decided that if humans were brave enough to fight, so were they. New hope surged through Susan's chest. She looked at her crew. saw the same feeling reflected in their faces. "All ships," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Focus fire on creating a path to the Voidborn command ship. The Defiance needs to get close enough to use the phase converter." The Allied ships formed a wedge, driving deep into the Voidborn formation. The Defiance flew in the center of the protective formation, pushing toward the massive Void Star. "Distance to target?" Susan asked. 8,000 kilometers and closing, Helen replied. In the engine room, Alan and Olivia prepared the phase converter for full power. The device hummed louder as they increased its energy flow. "The converter is drawing more power than expected," Alan reported to the bridge. "We'll only get one shot at this." "Make it count," Susan replied. The ship rocked again as enemy fire broke through their escort's protection. "Hull breach on deck 2, Paul shouted. "Shields failing." "Distance," Susan demanded. 6,000 kilometers, 5,500. Helen counted down. A massive blast from the Void Star itself struck the ship, sending everyone sprawling. Alarms blared throughout the Defiance. "Engine core destabilizing," Paul reported, his face pale. "We're losing containment." Susan pulled herself back to her feet. "Helen?" 5,100 kilometers, Helen said. "Close enough," Susan decided. "Alan, activate the converter now." In the engine room, Alan slammed his hand down on the activation control. The phase converter pulsed once, twice, then released a wave of blue-white energy that spread outward from the Defiance. As the wave touched the nearest Voidborn ships, the purple glow of their hulls flickered and died. The ships didn't explode. They simply stopped, hanging motionless in space. The wave continued spreading, reaching ship after ship, until it finally washed over the massive Void Star itself. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the points of the star-shaped vessel began to dim. "It's working," Helen whispered. But the celebration was cut short as more alarms sounded. "Engine core breach imminent," Paul reported. "We have minutes at most." Susan looked at her crew, her brave, determined crew who had followed her on this impossible mission. "Abandon ship," she ordered. "All hands to escape pods." The galaxy chuckled when humans sent one ship. Then it arrived. Escape pods launched from the Defiance, carrying crew members away from the dying ship. Paul coordinated the evacuation from the bridge, making sure everyone got to safety. "Admiral, you need to go now," he urged Susan, who still stood at her command station. "Not yet," she said. "Alan, Olivia, Lisa, are you clear of the engine room?" There was no answer. "They're still trying to stabilize the converter," Paul reported after, checking the ship's internal sensors. "If it shuts down before affecting all the Voidborn ships..." Susan nodded. "I'm going after them. Get to an escape pod, Paul. That's an order." Before he could argue, she was already moving toward the elevator. The ship shuddered around her as the damaged engines struggled to hold together. In the engine room, Susan found Alan and Olivia working frantically at the converter controls while Lisa tried to maintain communications with the Allied fleet. "You need to evacuate now," Susan told them. "The converter is becoming unstable," Alan explained, not looking up from his work. "If it fails before the wave reaches all the Voidborn ships, some could recover." "I'm staying to monitor the effect," Lisa added. "The Allied ships need to know which Voidborn vessels are neutralized." Susan looked at the three of them, dedicated, brave, willing to risk everything to complete the mission. She made her decision. 2 more minutes, she said. "Then we all leave. No arguments." Those 2 minutes felt like hours. The ship rocked, with small explosions as systems failed throughout the Defiance. The engine core warning changed from a steady alarm to a pulsing scream that meant catastrophic failure was imminent. "Time's up," Susan said. "Let's go." They rushed to the nearest escape pod bay but found the corridor blocked by fallen debris. Susan led them to an alternative route, even as the ship's internal structure groaned around them. They reached the last remaining escape pod just as the final warning sounded. The 4 of them crowded inside, and Susan hit the launch control. Nothing happened. "Launch system damaged," the pod's computer reported in a calm voice. Alan pushed past Susan to access the manual controls. "I can bypass the system," he said, "but it will take a minute." "We don't have a minute," Olivia whispered. Outside the small window of the escape pod, they could see the battle. The Voidborn ships hung motionless in space, affected by the converter's energy wave. The Allied ships were moving among them, approaching cautiously. Alan worked with frantic speed, connecting wires and rerouting power. "Almost there," he muttered. True. Ship gave a massive lurch. Warning lights flashed red throughout the pod. "Engine core breach in 10 seconds, the ship's computer announced. "Alan," Susan said, tension making her voice tight. "Got it," Alan shouted, connecting the final wire. The escape pod shot away from the Defiance just as the ship's engines exploded in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave caught the pod, sending it tumbling through space. Inside, the 4 humans were thrown against their restraints. Susan hit her head on the control panel and felt warmth spreading down her face. Then darkness took her. She woke to the sound of voices. Not human voices, but the chirping speech of the Zenith. Susan opened her eyes to see a medical bay with strange equipment. Dr. Sam stood nearby talking with a Zenith medical officer. "Admiral's awake," Sam called out when he noticed her stirring. Soon Paul, Nancy, Doug, and Ryan gathered around her bed. Their faces showed relief but also something else, a kind of wonder. "Did it work?" Susan asked, her voice rough. Paul nodded. "Better than we expected. The converter didn't just disable the Voidborn ships, it freed them." "Freed them?" Susan tried to sit up, but Sam gently pushed her back down. "The Voidborn weren't one race," Ryan explained. "They were dozens of different species, all controlled by parasitic beings that Commander Zev calls the Masters. The phase converter disrupted the Masters' control." "Where are Alan, Olivia, and Lisa?" Susan asked, suddenly worried. "They're fine," Paul assured her. "Minor injuries only. They're helping establish communication with the freed Voidborn ships." 3 days later, Susan stood on the bridge of Commander Zev's ship, looking out at an incredible sight. Hundreds of ships, former Voidborn vessels now free of the Master's control, floated alongside the Allied fleet. Representatives from dozens of races that had been enslaved were meeting with the Alliance members. "It's more than a victory," Gretel said, standing beside her. "It's a revolution. These people have been slaves for centuries." Susan nodded. There was so much to process. "And Earth? Have you received any news?" "Your Captain Ward sent a fast ship back with news of the victory," Gretel said. "They should have reached your world by now." A human figure approached. Jack Winters, the ambassador who had stood alone before the laughing Galactic Council. "Admiral," he said, smiling. "The Galactic Council has requested your presence. They're not laughing anymore." 1 week later, Susan stood in the same great hall where Jack had been mocked. This time she wasn't alone. Her crew stood with her, along with representatives from all the Allied worlds and the newly freed races. The council leader Zorl addressed the gathered beings. "We were wrong," he said simply. "We dismissed humanity as young and inexperienced. We laughed when they offered one ship against hundreds. We failed to see that innovation and courage can overcome even the greatest odds." He turned to Susan. "The former Voidborn fleet, now calling themselves the Liberated, have asked to form an alliance with Earth. They believe humans understand freedom in ways that older races have forgotten." Susan looked at her crew, at Alan and Olivia who had created the miracle that saved them all, at Doug whose flying skills had kept them alive, at Ryan, Helen, Lisa, Nancy, Paul, and all the others who had risked everything on this mission. "Earth would be honored to form this alliance," she said. "But not just with the Liberated, with all who wish to join us." She looked directly at the council leader. "The galaxy is changing. Old enemies can become new friends. Those who were once enslaved are now free. We have a chance to build something better together." As the council chamber filled with cheers and sounds of approval from hundreds of different species, Susan thought about how far they had come. From one small ship facing ridicule to standing at the beginning of a new era for the galaxy. The old council might have chuckled when humans sent one ship, but no one was laughing now. Back on Earth, crowds gathered to welcome home the heroes of the Defiance. Susan saw her daughter Kate waiting at the landing pad, tears streaming down her face. As Susan stepped off the shuttle, Kate ran to her. They embraced as the crowd cheered around them. "I knew you'd come back," Kate whispered. Susan smiled. "We humans are good at beating the odds." Above them, ships from 24 worlds filled Earth's sky. No longer enemies, no longer strangers, but allies and friends brought together by one small ship that refused to give up. The galaxy had changed forever, and it all began when the humans sent one ship.